I don't know. What do you mean? How? What?
The cover to the table of wood clipped on. Bill was blowing away.
Oh, did you get it?
I got it.
That's all this is. That's fringe.
should be able to.
Right, but Mark, can you see me?
I can see Chip.
Yeah, well.
Now you can see it.
But you have me the way you want me on that?
Well, can you see the screen share?
No. See, that's the,
Well, you can share a screen. but-
right, but I gotta let people in. I still think I need to log in differently. Everybody, I'll be back.
Now you can see the screen share.
Well, is the screen share coming?
Yep, it is.
Are you seeing the PowerPoint?
We're seeing a page that's got
Yeah,
the
that's-
book cover. And it says Tuesday, July 14, 7 PM, Washington's and Jonathan Horn. And it just switched to Thomas Jefferson Education.
I need to let people in if he's doing the job. So I need to be administrative.
Okay, so what, you need to sign into,
Museum, Roseanne at Museums on the Green.
which is where you were. You mean you need to sign into that computer?
No, I can sign in through here, but I need to be, I can't use my home password.
I didn't use your home password at all.
You didn't?
No, I just signed you into Zoom with this meeting ID and password.
Okay. So, Mark, am I okay as letting people in? Can you see me on that side?
Yeah, yes, you can.
Okay. But I should have the participants.
But Roseanne, once we get started, then you have to mute yourself.
Right,
Oh, I don't.
mute yourself.
Oh, yeah. No.
So there's your participants here,
Okay.
all right?
Okay.
I'm leaving.
Goodbye.
Do you want to use the desk up there, or
No. I think I'm okay.
just have to put yourself on mute at some point?
So do you see the PowerPoint now? The screen? Okay.
And I see it says recording.
Yeah.
I'm speaking with the mouth. Are they gonna be 50 people? Showing? And Chris Smith is in the army of Roseanne and 2 you. So I think I'm still on live.
Well, it's click in as you, so I don't. As long as you can see what I'm doing, it just.
I'm not gonna touch it.
Right.
I'm just saying.
But after this is done, I want to log out because I didn't find you on my account anyway.
It didn't happen, right? You know,
Actually, this looks really good, Mark.
Well, Joanna had a lot to do with it, so I did the original one and she made it better.
think it looks really good.
Anybody else checking in?
Not yet. I just wanted to check the number that you gave me to do the email, and it's fine. I just got a little weird because I'm like,
Well, I mean, it's 20 minutes before, so I mean, it's fine.
So I just wanted to make sure. I don't know if they don't let participants in it until a certain time, like 10 minutes before or whatever. Right?
Well, once you start,
It is-
yeah, I mean, look, I wasn't expecting everyone to show up at, 6:45, but,
I just wanted to make sure that everything is working the way it should be.
that makes two of us.
And the only thing is that you're on here twice as the host and the co-host, but then I'm only in as me.
Yeah.
I don't know, can I still let people in if they come in after? That's my concern.
Can you adjust any of the settings on that?
What do you mean?
Like, can you change Mark? Can you mute Mark, or can you?
No.
And Roseanne, that's why we're, like we said at the staff meeting, it's like, is everything going to go perfectly? Probably not, but that's why we'll see what doesn't go perfectly tonight, and we'll adjust accordingly.
I just think that I need to be at a different. When you look at your participants, what is it showing for me? Is it just me?
Just as Roseanne D'Amelio, that's it. Yeah.
It doesn't say co-host or anything like that.
So you're logged in as a regular participant?
Yeah. But when Mark's talking, if people come in, I have to let them
Yeah,
in.
no, I understand what you're saying, but I don't, is there a separate ID and password? Mark, did you use a unique ID and password to log in?
No, I'd use one that Zoom provided. You know what I mean? I didn't create my own. But the fact that Roseanne actually can talk means she is the co-host. It's like the guy on the Zoom thing today, the treasurer.
Yeah.
Because everybody else comes in as muted.
Yeah. Okay, but like I said, I don't know if I can let people in, so you got to keep having to look at that to make sure that you're letting people in.
Okay.
This is nerve-wracking, isn't it?
I was gonna say that Claire Smith.
Who's Claire Smith?
She's a member.
So she's logged in.
Yeah.
Fine.
So she's
Oh,
logged
okay, so maybe she's the alternate. That's fine then.
What?
Keep showing that she's trying to connect.
Come on, cross.
So I don't know if she's in here or not.
There she is.
I'm connecting on the thing. Betty Smithson.
No, I don't know if you saw that, but I did. It said Betty Smith's in the waiting room. Did you see that? I
Yeah.
did. Okay. So
But
then
I
you,
can't let her in though. That's the problem.
okay. I can handle it. It's fine. I mean, but that's again one of the things we have to figure out is that, so if we do host and co-host, it's actually one of the reasons that I wanted you to see that Tom Schaefer, because I've been emailing
Yeah.
them separately, so we can now come up with questions and say, okay, that Roseanne and Mark want to be co-hosts. How do we do that? And so
Yeah.
I'm sure it's a simple.
I honestly think, Mark, that I am on through my Zoom account and I need on through
I
the
think you're
museum.
right.
Should I try logging in again?
No, not necessarily. I
Okay.
mean, it's
All right.
But I didn't, when I logged you into that Zoom account,
Yeah.
I didn't log you into I didn't use our ID.
I
or
think because it
password.
automatically, it's on my computer. That's why I think.
Yeah, I mean, Doreen used my account today because she had a Zoom meeting at the same time at
Yeah.
2 o'clock as we did, and actually right now she's downstairs watching, and it's on my account.
Yeah, I think.
Okay, this gentleman is the speaker next week.
John McManus. So I feel good that Betty and all these people are coming on. I feel good about that. Because I got the right link. I was just concerned for a minute.
Mute.
But you're getting the buttons to admit them into the,
I am.
okay, beautiful.
Okay.
Gotta figure that out from this
I
end.
know exactly what it is. So I should
Can
log
you,
through museums.
this is Ron Rossbottom. Can you hear me?
I can.
Can you see me?
No.
No, I don't know why that is.
You might have to start his camera.
Start video. Okay, let's see what happens.
There you go.
Oh, there I am.
Well, very nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you too, finally. I sure wish I were in Falmouth instead of Western Massachusetts, locked down. So are you going to speak tonight, Mark, or is John McManus going to speak?
No, I'm going to speak.
Right. Let's see, put on a light here. There needs some light. Does that help? There we go. Okay. You know, in general, when I get Zoom invitations, they give the site completely, and you just press it and you're on. They don't give, like you did, the password and the whatever else it is. So
Yeah, that's actually one of the reasons we're doing this tonight with me talking, because that way we can figure out. I'm the lab rat, so by the time you speak and other people speak, we'll hopefully have some of this down.
yeah. Well, if you can, it's much easier for people to join if you just give them the site reference, the URL, and they just hit it and they're on. They don't have to go through the
Right.
other process.
Okay.
Other than that, I've Zoomed a lot, but I haven't Zoomed for strangers. I'm going to have to learn to do. I didn't teach this semester. but next semester, I'm sure we're going to be teaching virtually. So I have to learn all about this. Oh, that looks like a good book.
I presume you want us muted and the video and our video screens off. How do you want it, Mark?
Muted, yes. You can, and I can make sure of that.
I'll mute myself. And turn our video screens off?
If you'd like, that's entirely up to you.
Okay.
As long as you can see what as long as you can see me and the PowerPoint, I'm good.
Yeah, it's coming through loud and clear. Looks really good.
Thank you.
Good. And are you going to have a chat for people who want to ask questions?
Yes.
You're going to have the chat thing set up, right? I haven't done that yet. This is a good list. So should I turn the mute off as well as the video?
Yeah. I would mute yourself. Yes.
Okay, I'm going to mute myself. Let's see, mute.
Oh no, we have the videos, the audio I'm talking. I gotta mute that.
What are you smiling at?
Okay, you can bring your chair over. Except I can't hear it. Show video.
I don't think you have the sound.
I know, I can't. I'm waiting to see, hear somebody start talking.
We can hear you.
Okay, share screen. So one of my swap shared screen video. Show thumbnail. All right.
Expressing major concerns about the Memorial Day holiday and possible crowding at beaches and parks. I'm personally asking people, don't be hanging out. The mayor says the city is still very much in the grips of the pandemic. All indication says that, we could be battling this pandemic for 8 months to a year. Walsh says he's also working with restaurants to help create outdoor dining when they're allowed to open in phase 2. The city has set up a website for them to apply for licenses. They're one-day licenses, so it'll be
Good evening, everybody. I trust you can hear me okay. I'm Mark Schmidt. I'm the Executive Director for the Falmouth Museums on the Green. I want to thank you for joining me tonight for our very first virtual talk. This is all part of our new virtual talk program. As we know, there's a whole new world out there. And so we want to be able to provide more education, more entertaining programming while we continue to be safer at home. We will have more than a dozen virtual talks planned over the next few weeks. And you'll have the opportunity to meet a fascinating group of historians and authors from around the corner and around the country. The upcoming schedule and registration details are going to be posted on our website. So if you go onto museumsonthegreen.org, you will find out what's coming up. We'll also be featuring the talks in our weekly e-blasts. So if you haven't signed up to receive our newsletters, please visit museumsonthegreen.org and do so. All talks will be free through July. Simply need to register in advance. If you have any questions, please email info@museumsonthegreen.org. Will things go perfectly? Probably not, but we'll get better as time goes along, so bear with me. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Cape Cod 5, First Citizens Federal Credit Union, and Martha's Vineyard Savings for making these talks possible. We also want to thank Eight Cousins Bookseller in Falmouth, as they will have copies of all the books involved in our series. Please note, our programs will be recorded. If you have a question, at the bottom of your screen, please use the chat feature to submit it. We'll answer questions as time permits. And again, this will be kind of a learning process for all of us. Thank you for your support. If you are not currently a member of the Museums on the Green, we encourage you to join by visiting our website, again, museumsonthegreen.org. Now sit back and enjoy tonight's program, which cleverly is brought to you by me. Now, as many of you know, I used to work at the Museum of World War II up in Natick, Massachusetts. It was the largest collective or individual collection of artifacts ever found. And it is no longer there. Trying to get this my PowerPoint to go here. Can everybody see that? Okay. Okay. I worked there before I came to Falmouth, and one of the things I always found fascinating about World War II is how much interest it has for people even today. You may not realize this, but literally since 1971, there's been at least one book, if not two, on the New York Times bestseller list about World War II. It continues to fascinate. For me, I happen to find the espionage the most interesting. And this is a story that I just found compelling in every way, shape, and form. And I really hope you enjoy this one as much as I do. Wars are won by men storming up the beach. They are won by planners correctly calculating how many rations and supplies an invading force will need. They are won by tacticians laying out grand strategy, by generals inspiring the men they command, by politicians galvanizing the will to fight, by writers putting the war into words. They are won by acts of strength, bravery, and guile. But they also won by feats of imagination. This act of imagination helped to topple Mussolini in Italy, helped to win battles in Russia, fixated Hitler's fascination in the Balkans, and allowed the Allies to invade Sicily with much less bloodshed than might otherwise have been spilled. Operation Mincemeat has been called the most spectacular single episode in the history of deception, and the official history of World War II describes it as perhaps the most perhaps the most successful single deception, I'll get it out, of the entire war. It was also probably the luckiest. I want to take you back to 1942. At the end of 1942, the war has started to turn for the Allies. They have defeated the Nazis in North Africa. They are interested in trying to create a second front. Remember, at this point, the Allies are also fighting in Russia. The Germans had attacked them in 1941. So now that the Allies have controlled North Africa, the obvious place to attack would be Italy. And if you look at your map right here, you can see that almost the most obvious place of all would be to launch from Tunisia into Sicily. It is clearly the objective that the Allies would attempt to take. And if you can see that, and if I can see that, then you have to know that the Nazis could see that too, and they prepared for it. They heavily fortified Sicily, preparing for an invasion that they knew would come. If you've seen the movie The Imitation Game, you know that the Allies had broken the code of the Enigma machine. They knew what the Germans were thinking. So what they had to do was to realize that, yes, they did want to attack Sicily. But how do we get the Germans off the scent? How can we make this a plan that we can effectively do? How can we get into Sicily without the Germans knowing? They looked at what Churchill referred to as the soft underbelly of Europe, and they realized that perhaps Sardinia was probably the place that they wanted to attack rather than Sicily. Or at least that's what Hitler was thinking, that the Allies were going to go to Sardinia, not Sicily. Sicily was too obvious. Because the Germans thought this way, because Hitler thought this way, the Allies began to plan to make sure that the Allies, that the Germans understood that the plans were going to come to Sardinia. They weren't, but that's what the Allies wanted the Germans to think. Hitler thought this way, keep them thinking this way. I introduced to you MI5. If you're familiar with espionage, you've heard of MI6. That's the foreign service. And when you watch every James Bond movie, he's in MI6. MI5 is the domestic counterintelligence and security. They protect the home front. MI5 is also the people that comes up with all the espionage plans. They're a bunch of nerds, but they come up with some really impressive things. And I want to introduce you to the stars of our show. Now you're going to meet some interesting personalities throughout all of this, and some of them have some very classic English names. To your left is a gentleman named Ewan Montague. He was the son of a Jewish lawyer. He had studied at Cambridge and Harvard. His wife was from the United States, and during the war, he made sure that she went back to Maryland, where her parents were from. So she's living in the United States. He's in England. Because he is of Jewish background, it's important to him that the Nazis be defeated. As a barrister, he used to take his bicycle to work. He'd have big files going on, but he was kind of the quintessential British lawyer. To the right is a gentleman named Charles Chumley. Chumley was 6'3". He was gawky. He wanted to join the Air Force, but he was too tall. His feet were too big. He was too gangly. But he was also very much a dreamer seeking adventure. These two are the brains behind what will become known as Operation Mincemeat. Montague, Chumley, and some other gentlemen, including a guy named Ian Fleming, who you've heard of before, and we're going to introduce him throughout this thing, made up a branch of MI5, which was called the 20 Committee. They named themselves because they used the Roman numerals XX for 20. And why did they use XX? Because it means double cross. They were known as Agents Mustache and Pipe. Montague is interesting because in addition to being in naval intelligence, he was aristocratic, he was detail-oriented. Unbeknownst to him, he also had a brother who was a covert Russian spy. Another member of the 20 Committee was a gentleman named Ian Fleming. Yes, you know him as the author and the inventor of James Bond, but this is where he gets his inspiration. And as Ian Fleming, who will also be working with Montague and Chumley to create this whole ruse. Fleming comes into work one day. It's January 1943. He had been reading a 1930s British mystery novelist named Basil Thomson. Thomson had achieved some success in the 1930s. It was reasonably well read, but not overly popular. But Fleming found it fascinating. And a book that Fleming was reading, that Thomson had written in 1934, talked about how a dead body was found with some papers on him that turned out to be false. Fleming comes into work one day and said, "Do you think we could pull off something like this?" Basically using some kind of a Trojan horse. Immediately, Chumley and Montague, who were dreamers, said, "This sounds kind of cool." So they went to the kind of aptly named Sir Bernard Spilsbury, the leading pathologist of his time, and a rather regal manner thing, rather humorless. But they went to Spilsbury and said, would it be possible to use a dead body, a corpse, for some kind of an espionage plan? And Spilsbury thought about it and said, actually, it was possible. Now, you would have to find a body that would make it look like it died of natural causes, and they explained that what they wanted to do was make sure that it made it look as if somebody had died in a plane crash. And Spilsbury thought about it, and they said, well, you know, actually, that's a good plan. If somebody dies from a plane crash, usually they die from shock more than they die from actual drowning if it's over water. So, okay. So the lungs don't necessarily have to fill up with water. This is possible. One of the things a word that I'm going to use a lot throughout all of this is plausible. Everything that they had to do had to be plausible. And Spilsbury thought about it and said, okay, well, let's think about this. So we find a corpse, we make it look like he fell from the sky over water. That's okay, we could try that. Now, interestingly, he goes to his friend Bentley Purchase, the London coroner, who is a rather lively sort, in kind of a macabre way for a coroner. He was very much a practical joker, as opposed to Spilsbury, who was very buttoned up. And he explained that MI5 is looking for a corpse, that they want to use this for an espionage. And Bentley Purchase said, okay. But now think about this. We're trying to be plausible. It is wartime. You're trying to find someone who's in their late 20s, early 30s, who's male. Well, it's wartime. You figure there's going to be a lot of corpses, but not really. All the men that are of that age are in the military they're fighting overseas, if they're perishing, it's usually through combat. That's not going to work. You have to find someone who's still domestic, but has to die of natural causes. Well, Purchas looks around and he looks around and he looks around. And in early February, he comes across a body that he thinks will work, and he gets a hold of Montague and Chumley. The corpse had died from asphyxiation, and they bring it back to London, where Bentley Purchas says, if I put this on ice, have it at 37 degrees Fahrenheit, I can keep it from decomposing for up to 3 months. So now the clock is ticking. They have a corpse as of the beginning of February. So now Montague and Chumley realize that they have to create an identity, a cover story, and everything that's going to make it work for this corpse, because they've only got 3 months before it decomposes. They go through the newspapers, the local papers, and they realize that as they go through the obituaries, the last name Martin seems to be rather common. So they created an identity, a legend, and they named him Major William Martin, and they put him in the Royal Navy. And the reason for that was it's a common enough name. It's not exotic in any way, shape, or form. If he's in the Royal Navy, there's a lot of officers there. And if he's a major, he's an officer, but not so high up that the Nazis would know of him. He's not a general. He's not an admiral. He's an officer, but not so far up, but high enough up that he could be entrusted with higher ranking officers' materials. Now we have to start creating a backstory for him. He's in the service. We have to give him a naval ID card. Well, you can't really take a picture of a corpse. That's not going to look good. Montague notices that there's somebody in the offices of MI5 who has a reasonable passing for the corpse. He tells him that we really need to take your picture. His name's Robbie Bross. They take his picture and they put it on a naval ID card. They also realize, because it looks so new, that they're going to have to issue a quote-unquote replacement card. Montague starts walking around with this ID card, rubs against his pants several times a day for the better part of 2 months. Now we also have to find him a uniform. He's an officer. So they find him a uniform that would fit the corpse. It's standard issue. Chumley starts wearing it every day to work, so it gives it the worn out feel. But they also start looking for other things. Now, what do you think might have been the hardest thing to find for an officer at this time? Well, I'll tell you. It was underwear, because officers get cotton underwear. And if you think anyone was going to willingly give up their cotton underwear in London to MI5, not so fast. They ultimately find somebody who's a lower ranking member of the aristocracy who's got some extra pairs of cotton underwear that he gives up to Chumley and Montague. When he hears the story, he goes, I don't want to know what you're doing with these. I told you he's got a uniform. Again, make it plausible. So this is what Chumley is wearing every day to work to give it a kind of a worn out feel. They also, what MI5 also has is something what they call pocket litter. Something that would basically be on your person when you're walking around. For a woman to be her purse, for a man it'd be things that in his pocket, in his coat pocket, things that somebody would have on them, their personal effects. So they make sure that he's got cigarettes, a watch, a billfold, keys. Actually, if you ever go to the Imperial War Museum in London, you can find a lot of this stuff. They have to give William Martin a backstory, things that you would find on him, because again, you have to make sure that this is plausible. If it's too perfect, the Nazis are going to realize it's a ruse. So they have to make sure that they kind of give it something that would make it look like an officer would have. For example, they go to Lloyd's of London and have them create a letter on the letterhead that he basically bounced a check. Okay, well, he's a little bit scatterbrained. He's an officer. He's at war. He didn't balance his checkbook. They go to the Naval Club in London, and they make sure that that he's got a bill of sale on him that shows that he rented a room for the day. They also make sure, and this is kind of the key to everything here. They go to some high-ranking officers, particularly Lord Louis Mountbatten, who was ostensibly his commanding officer, basically vouching for him that William Martin's a good officer. I trust him with it. But the coup de grace in everything in all his pocket litter is a letter that's written from Archibald Nye, who's the vice chief of the Imperial General Staff and would know all their plans, everything that was going on. He's in the Home Office. To his friend, General Sir Harold Alexander, who's commanding the British forces under Eisenhower in Tunisia and Syria. It is a letter that's the key piece, basically saying that we know that our plans are ultimately going to attack Sardinia. We want you to be prepared for this because we know you're in North Africa, so start your preparations for Sardinia. Mountbatten also puts in a letter to Martin, making a kind of a lame joke about sardines so people could catch on to it. They also try to make sure that it would come across as a real letter between friends. They make some kind of off-color remarks about working for Eisenhower, what a pain in the butt he is, et cetera, but things that again, that would be plausible. This shows the letter from Mountbatten to Admiral Cunningham, who's in charge of the forces in the Mediterranean, the naval forces there, and he makes a joke about sardines. They also Cholmondeley and Montague try to figure out what exactly would William Martin have on him. And they figured that it might be something good if it was a letter from his dad. And since Montague had kind of taken it under his wing that he was going to create the persona, Montague ultimately writes a rather scolding letter. He writes it as if he's the father, basically telling Major William Martin to kind of get his act together, that he's got a chance for promotion. This is a big opportunity that the nation needs you. So instead of kind of a comforting letter from home, this is kind of a scolding letter from dad, saying that, the country is counting on you. And of course, what would any naval officer have, but also a picture of his beloved? Montague's secretary was a woman named Jean Leslie. And you can see here, a rather comely lass. And she actually had a beau of her own, but she produces this picture that she had taken in the summer of 1942, and you can see a woman in a one-piece bathing suit during wartime would be something that she would have sent to her fiance. So Jean Leslie, Pam, as she's known and for purposes, becomes another part of the pocket litter that is found on William Martin, that this is somebody who is a real human being, who's got a real beloved at home, and this is somebody who cares about him. In fact, they then go to a jeweler and have him draft up an engagement ring invoice that he's got on him. All of this stuff will be found on William Martin, the corpse's personage, to try to make sure that it is plausible, that he is a real human. They also then make sure that his death notice is put in a London newspaper. And because they figure, and they're rightly so, that the British know that the Germans read the British tabloids to see their death notices, and William Martin is a common name, so he's listed there. What becomes a little bit of a help to MI5, to Chumley and to Montague, is that he's also, the day that this was listed, the British actor Leslie Howard, who you might remember from Gone with the Wind, was also killed, but his plane was shot down, and his death notice was in the papers that same day. So it attracted a lot more attention than it might normally have. In mid-April, all these things have been assembled. We are now into the middle of April, and it is determined that they are now ready to launch William Martin and have him do his work. Montague goes through the various names of all the operations. The British have a dossier of possible operations. He thinks Mincemeat's kind of a cool name. And so he picks that, and it is determined that they are going to take the body from London to the Scottish coast. I now introduce a name that hopefully you'll remember, because it is a classic British name, St. John, known as Jock Horsfall. He was a race car driver. He was employed by MI5 in case they would ever need a driver. Horsfall has a 1937 van that he's customized, and he is going to take the William Martin, the corpse's body, from London to the Scottish coast, 420 miles away. Chumley and Montague are going to ride in the back with the corpse. He's going to drive all night. He's going to get there. And I would be remiss if I left out this detail. Jock Horsfall was legally blind. In the process of driving from London to the Scottish coast, besides the fact that he almost runs into a tram, besides the fact he runs right over a roundabout, and several pedestrians were almost hit along the way, somehow he gets there. Were there to meet a submarine, the HMS Seraph. It is off the coast of Scotland, and they are going to take a new cargo. The captain, Bill Jewell, is the only one who knows what's going to go on, that the cargo that's being delivered in a special container, which says optical equipment, is actually containing a corpse that has been being still cold now with carbon dioxide, with dry ice. When the dry ice will melt, the fumes, the mist will actually help keep the body preserved. Before they load it into the container, Montague and Chumley have gone down to London. They've taken the body out of the coroner's office. Bentley Purchase has turned over the body to him. They run into one little snag. Because he's now been on ice for over 2 months, the feet are frozen. They have to take out essentially some sterno, melt the feet so they can put the boots on before, but not make it sure that they burn the feet. But they do it, and they load it, into the van. It is going to be taken to a place off the coast of Spain called Huelva. And there's a reason for this. Huelva, besides being a fishing village, has a very large Nazi population. There is they know that there are Nazi spies there. Spain is officially neutral, but it's fascist. If you recall that there was a revolution in the 30s, the Spanish Civil War. It's run by Francisco Franco. They are officially, although fascist, they are officially neutral. But also one of the reasons that they target Huelva, Spain, is because it's also a Roman Catholic country. They understand that the coroner there does not particularly like to do postmortems and check on cadavers. So they are hopeful that that is going to work in their favor. I introduced another man, a guy named Charles Fraser Smith. He was the quartermaster of MI5. He was known as Q. And he had myriad inventions, and he is the one who will actually develop a container that's used to keep Martin's body. It is going to be loaded into the HMS Sarah. They are going to launch it off the coast of Huelva, Spain, as if it was a torpedo. Ultimately, once it's launched, they do this at 4:30 in the morning. They launch the body out. They take the body out of it, shoot it out. The Seraph then goes 12 miles off the coast of Spain, where they sink the canister. In fact, Charles Fraser Smith had done such a good job that they riddle it with bullet holes, but it doesn't sink. They actually have to use a plastic explosive to make it go away. And the body of Major William Martin, Royal Navy, is launched off the coast of Huelva, Spain. Now, all that pocket litter that I told you about is on his personage, but it's also in what's called a haversack, a billfold of file that everything that he would have had on him. Now, one of the things that they worried about was that, normally speaking, a person would have had this in his hands. Rigor mortis might have set in, and they were afraid that the haversack would float away. So what they do is they take basically a chain, attach the haversack to the wrist of the corpse so that it doesn't float away. After all, if you find the body but you don't find all the ruse, what's the point? So it is attached to Major William Martin's body. It is found by a fisherman about 6 in the morning, and it is taken to the authorities, the Spanish authorities, where they then quickly report it to the German authorities in the town of Huelva. One of the forgotten people in all of this was the vice consul in Huelva, a guy named Francis Hazelden. Hazelden, a career diplomat, was tipped off to what was going on, so he knew this was coming. And he very politely but formally said to the British and German authorities, but I'm sorry, to the Spanish and German authorities, that we understand there was a plane crash. One of our officers was shot, or was missing in action. If you happen to find the body, there's some papers we would really like to get back. He then sends several telegrams back and forth to London, by design, knowing that the Germans and the Spanish were watching him, and would intercept it saying, I made contact with the Spanish government, with the Spanish authorities. I asked for William Martin's belongings back. We'll see what happens. And this goes on for about a week, and he sends several communiques, each one with more urgency, asking the Spanish that if you happen to come across this body, we really, 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 really need these things back. So now the Germans, which had been a little suspicious anyway, are, what have we here? Adding to our story are two gentlemen that go back to your work days. To the right is a spy a diligent one named Adolf Klaus. He worked for the Abwehr, the German military. He was very by the book. He was thorough. He was tenacious. He understood what was going on, and he wanted to make sure that if this corpse had something that was of value to the Reich, let's find out about it. But he wanted to do things properly. To the left is a gentleman named Karl Erich Kuhlenthal. Now, again, go back to your work days. Did you ever have a boss that you know that you worked really hard, but the boss was really kind of bucking for a promotion and was going to use your work to try to promote him? Kuhlenthal was that guy. He was desperate to get out of Spain. He wanted a job in Berlin. That's where the action was. That's where the glory was. Klaus, he was a useful tool. He was a good employee. But Kuhlenthal had designs on bigger and better things. And he also was fearful that the Third Reich government would realize that he had Jewish blood in him, that his relatives were Jewish. He had hid it. He had kept that under wraps. But he was really hoping for a big score in Spain so he could get a big promotion onto Berlin. Well, Klaus is good at his job. Klaus takes a steel rod, a probe, and he sticks it in the still wet. They've opened up the haversack. They find these envelopes. They find these letters. Klaus takes a probe to the still wet envelope, twists it so he's able to remove all the documents in there and not break the wax seal on the envelope. So they can read what's inside. The British will know this because the British have actually put an eyelash inside the envelope in case things are taken. And when things get back, they realize the eyelash is gone. Well, they go through these things and they see the letter from Mountbatten, but especially the letter to Alexander saying that the plan is to go to Sardinia. Kuhlenthal immediately says, I must take this to Berlin. I have to take this myself. This is too important. Klaus isn't so sure. This seems a little too perfect. But Kuhlenthal, being the boss, said, no, Adolf, I got this one. And he takes it directly to the office of Adolf Hitler. While in Berlin, a gentleman there named Baron Alexis von Riena, who's a very trusted advisor to Hitler, is there, and he looks at the letter too, and he authenticates it. Now, what's interesting is that von Riena was very much a German, but very, very much an anti-Hitlerite, very much an anti-Nazi. It is very possible that Kuhlenthal actually believed it, and von Riena realized that these things were frauds. But because he disliked Hitler so much, he was willing to verify it because he felt it would help topple Hitler, that this would be that his misleading of Hitler would be to the benefit of the Allies. In addition, there was a double agent, a guy named Juan Pujol, was known as Garbo, who was working for Kuhlenthal. Now, Garbo had convinced Kuhlenthal that he had this network of agents. In fact, he was a double agent. He was Spanish. He was furious at the Germans that they had helped install a fascist government. He offered his services to the Nazis, who accepted. In point of fact, he told them he was in Portugal and that he had a network of spies out of Lisbon. In point of fact, he worked for the British. He was in London. He never set foot in Portugal, but the Germans never checked on him, and they counted on him for his veracity because of his quote-unquote large network of spies. He confirmed that everything about William Martin was true, and in early May, they saw that Hitler ordered that troops were to be removed from Sicily and moved to Sardinia. Pujol sent in Garbo, Agent Garbo, code name, sent a message over to London saying, mincemeat swallowed whole. In July 1943, the Allies launch what's known as Operation Husky, the invasion of Sicily, and ultimately the invasion of Italy. Sicily goes far easier than expected. Now, it's not entirely all mincemeat's doing, but it had a large part to that. Ultimately, Mussolini, who always felt that the Allies were going to come to Sicily, becomes overthrown in the summer of 1943. Hitler, who always felt they were going to Sardinia or Greece, but in this case Sardinia, was absolutely shaken when they go to Sicily and ultimately capture Italy. Really upset him. If you've heard the talks that we've done about all the deceptions that go on to the D-Day thing in Normandy, with the Enigma codes and et cetera, and all the ruses of Operation Bodyguard, in some regards, it is because of the success of mincemeat that Hitler doesn't believe all of the everything that's going on with the Normandy invasion until it's too late, where he doesn't free up panzer divisions until July 1944, when it's too late. Now, the roaring success of mincemeat is not overlooked. In 1944, Montague is made a knight. In 1948, Chumley is made a knight. They bask in the success. But in 1950, a former cabinet officer named Duff Cooper writes a book in which it's a fiction book supposedly, but he talks about how a dead body was used to fake out the Germans with some deception plans. And MI5 gets wind of this, and they tell Montague, we got to head this off. So they authorize Montague to write a book called The Man Who Never Was. It's a sanitized version and if you read his book, it's a good read, but things don't go quite as well as Montague would have you believe. There's a book that's out by a gentleman named Ben McIntyre called Operation Mincemeat, that if you really want to learn more about that, I would recommend the McIntyre book. In 1956, a movie that you might still see, it's been out on Turner Classic Movies, called The Man Who Never Was, starring Clifton Webb, Gloria Graham. You might remember her from It's a Wonderful Life. And also, you'll see a part in there, if you watch it, the actor Stephen Boyd is a German spy. Now, if you watch the movie, the Stephen Boyd part, that's Masala from Ben-Hur, if you don't recognize the name. The part with the German spy doesn't really occur. That's Hollywood. But MI5 records show that German spies, plural, actually did check up on the whereabouts and the bona fides of William Martin. So all of their pocket material in all his deceptions came to pass because they actually did go to the Royal Navy Club to make sure of a guy named William Martin was there. They actually did go to Lloyd's of London in multiple spies. So people did check out the German spies that had happened, but Stephen Boyd becomes one composite character. Ian Fleming remembered. Later, he writes a book called You Only Live Twice, which was based upon Operation Mincemeat, the creator of James Bond. So he remembers. But it wasn't until the 1990s, because a burial marker actually had been placed in Huelva, Spain in 1943 for Major William Martin. In 1996, at the request of a DNA sample, the body was dug up, and it was revealed to be the body of a Welshman named Glynwer Michael. Glynwer Michael really existed. He was a homeless man, aged 34. He had inadvertently died by asphyxiation because being homeless, his eyesight was failing. he had inadvertently put rat poisoning on a British biscuit. He thought it was jam. He had licked it and he passed away due to asphyxiation. But one of the reasons his body was chosen was because he was homeless. He did not have any next of kin. So there was no other person there to claim his body. Now remember, as we said before, finding a body at this time wasn't all that easy. But you also wanted to make sure if you did find a body that the next of kin wasn't going to claim it. So because he didn't have next of kin, it passed. The grave marker was redone. So it says William Martin and also Glenwar Michael. So both names are now on the body. It is still in Huelva, Spain. So if you feel the need to travel there, you can actually see the body of William Martin. But we now know the real identity. Again, I mentioned if you want to buy a book, 8 Cousins will have these. I would recommend Ben McIntyre's Operation Mincemeat. It's a thorough examination of what happened. And Montague's book is a good read too, especially if we're still all at home being quarantined. It's worth the price. Now, before we leave, I had mentioned about a guy named Ian Fleming, and all roads lead. Now, there really was a Q that he took. There really was an M who was in charge of MI5. So I have a couple questions to leave you about Ian Fleming. This is the creator of James Bond, as I mentioned. What was the biggest selling book ever written by Ian Fleming? And what did Fleming call his home in Jamaica? These are great for parties when we get unquarantined. The answers are, he's the author of Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and at his Jamaican mansion called Goldeneye, that's where he wrote his books about James Bond. Now, I'd also mentioned too, one other little trivia fact. I mentioned that William Martin's death notice was in the paper the same day as Leslie Howard. And again, if you remember Leslie Howard, he's Ashley from Gone with the Wind, another tall, dignified guy. He died in a plane crash too, and you may not know why. Well, Winston Churchill was visiting in the United States for the first time. He was visiting with Franklin Roosevelt. He knew that in order to get back and fly back from Washington to London, he knew he was being watched by German spies. So at 5 minutes to 5, there was a flight, a BOAC flight leaving to go to London, and a rather short man, dumpy guy, looking like Winston Churchill, boards. And the Germans immediately notify Berlin, and they see him with a bodyguard, tall man. The BOAC plane, 1 hour into his flight, was shot down by the Luftwaffe. The plane crashed. It turns out that Leslie Howard was the body double of Winston Churchill's bodyguard. So he died in a plane crash in a ruse that was created by MI5. Winston Churchill had actually flown out earlier that night and got home safely. So with that, I thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it did not put you to sleep. And I want to thank you for your attention. I hope you join us for more of our virtual talks. Any questions here? Did I answer all your questions? Was it worth your time? All right. Well, thank you very much. Our next talk will be a week from tonight. As a gentleman named Ronald Rossbottom, and it's 7 o'clock on May 28th. We also have one on June 2nd. And if you go to our website, you will see all our virtual talks. Again, they are free. Yeah, Marianne, you got a question?
No, just thank you.
All right. thank you, everybody, and have a good night. Stay safe. I'll see you soon.